In a disconcerting episode aboard an aircraft, a flight attendant abruptly demanded the removal of a black police officer, Jeremy Pavel, aged 31, over a seating confusion that escalated unexpectedly. Officer Pavel was making his way down the narrow airplane aisle to his assigned seat when he discovered it was already occupied by a young man engrossed in reading a newspaper. Confused and seeking to clarify the situation, Officer Pavel politely approached the young man, pointing out the apparent error since the seat he was occupying was assigned to Pavel. The young man, without looking up from his newspaper, simply stated that he had been allocated that seat, suggesting a possible mix-up. Officer Pavel double-checked his boarding pass, confirming the seat number indeed matched the one listed, and attempted to engage the young man in a conversation to resolve the issue amicably, before they could reach an understanding. They were interrupted by a flight attendant, whose abrupt manner contrasted sharply with the typical friendly demeanor expected of airline staff. Identified by her name tag as Catherine G., she appeared more stern than soothing. She briskly instructed Officer Pavel to find another seat as the flight was about to commence. Taken aback by her brusque approach, Officer Pavel tried to explain the situation, maintaining a calm and respectful tone. "Miss, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This gentleman is seated in my assigned place." Instead of checking the seating chart or offering to help resolve the confusion, Catherine dismissively informed him that all seats in the economy class were occupied, and shockingly suggested that Officer Pavel might have to disembark immediately as the plane was ready to depart. Dumbfounded by the flight attendant's unanticipated and unreasonable demand, Officer Pavel's disbelief was palpable. He was at a loss as to how such a misunderstanding could lead to him being asked to leave the plane, especially just as it was about to take off. He stood there, trying to digest the rapidly unfolding events, hoping for a sensible resolution to what should have been a simple seating error. Inconsistent treatment could be rooted in deeper, unspoken issues. It also made him more aware of the complexities of human interactions and the unpredictability of people's attitudes based on their circumstances or biases. This incident not only illuminated the potential for conflict in what might seem like straightforward situations but also emphasized the need for greater empathy and patience in handling such interactions. As Officer Pavel cautiously approached the young woman, his goal was to get clarification on her earlier statements, yet before he could articulate his inquiry, the flight attendant, identified as Catherine, proceeded with resolve and without regret. "Please sir, I need to ensure the comfort and satisfaction of all our passengers, and unfortunately, your presence is complicating that effort. There seems to be a confusion with your ticket, and the only solution is for you to leave the plane," she declared. Her voice laced with a conclusive tone and a hint of sass that made Officer Pavel wonder if they had previously encountered each other. This unexpected challenge was particularly exasperating for the officer, coming after a demanding month and just before a much-anticipated 3-week vacation following a major report submission in Florida, his intended destination. The possibility of being unable to fly and potentially missing his deadline was deeply troubling, amid his growing unease. Officer Pavel managed to remain collected and addressed Catherine in a soft, subdued voice, attempting to negotiate a resolution that wouldn't require him to disembark. "Look, I can't afford to miss this flight. Can we please work together to find a solution that doesn't involve me getting off the plane?" he explained, his tone calm, conveying his willingness to resolve the matter peacefully while acknowledging the importance of following protocols. Unfortunately, his composed approach did little to soften Catherine, who met his plea with a cold, unsympathetic stare. At this juncture, Officer Pavel's patience was nearly exhausted by the flight attendant's stubborn demeanor. While he could sympathize if she was simply having a rough day, he recognized that it didn't justify her uncooperative and curt behavior. In a bid to find assistance, he tried to catch the attention of another flight attendant but was interrupted by an unexpected turn of events. Catherine, who had just treated him harshly, suddenly switched her demeanor, addressing another passenger with a bright smile and a gentle inquiry about their concern, which left Officer Pavel both confused and stunned. He observed in disbelief as her friendly attitude vanished as swiftly as it had appeared, her face turning cold once again as she looked back at him. This sharp and startling contrast in her behavior not only left him speechless but also deeply disturbed. Despite the bewildering interaction, the young officer realized that such indifferent and unpredictable behavior might stem from underlying, unspoken complexities, highlighting the intricate nature of human interactions and the critical need for patience and understanding in all exchanges. Throughout his life, Officer Pavel had often dealt with the sting of racial discrimination. Raised in the diverse yet sometimes volatile neighborhoods of Brooklyn, where racial tensions were not uncommon, he had faced frequent bias. This prejudice came not just from strangers but also from his colleagues and superiors within the police force. Despite these adversities, Officer Pavel had climbed the ranks to earn a position of respect and authority as a police officer. Now aboard an airplane, Officer Pavel was reminded that racial biases were still prevalent, as he sensed a familiar coldness from a young flight attendant, while he wondered if he was perhaps being overly sensitive. He chose to give her the benefit of the doubt, hoping her behavior was not influenced by racial prejudice. As the economy section of the plane was visibly full, Officer Pavel approached the flight attendant, politely named Catherine, to inquire about the possibility of an upgrade to business class. He explained that he was on official police duty and needed to ensure he could stay on the flight. Catherine, however, briskly denied his request, stating that no seats were available in business class without checking the actual availability. Observing from the sidelines, Officer Pavel noticed another attendant discreetly upgrading a passenger to business class, which hinted that Catherine might have been dishonest about seat availability. Her dismissive nature was underscored when she skeptically asked to see his badge and scrutinized it with apparent disdain. The situation escalated when a young female passenger, who had been watching the exchange, stood up and openly challenged Catherine's dismissive and seemingly prejudiced treatment of Officer Pavel, who remained calm. Feeling cornered, Catherine quickly reverted to a more amicable demeanor, insisting she was just following protocol and urged the passenger to sit as the plane was preparing to depart. Catherine then led Officer Pavel to a secluded area near the crew station for a private discussion, away from the eyes of increasingly disturbed passengers. Once they were alone, Catherine, who revealed she was the head flight attendant, abandoned all pretense of professionalism. Her attitude shifted from merely unhelpful to openly hostile, leaving no doubt in Officer Pavel's mind about her true feelings towards him. Once she moved away from the other passengers, no authority above her could alter her decision. This incident served as a stark reminder to Officer Pavel of the deep-rooted biases that still permeate daily interactions, despite significant personal and professional progress. The whole ordeal highlighted the continuous challenges associated with addressing and dismantling racial prejudice across different areas of life. As he stood there, Officer Pavel was visibly taken aback, his mouth open in astonishment, as he scrutinized the young woman in front of him. Her sudden display of disdain caught him off guard, leaving him both shocked and perplexed. With genuine concern, he asked if he had unintentionally offended her in the past. Instead of replying, she just sneered and, with a noticeable air of irritation, insisted that he leave the airplane and arranged to travel on the next available flight. Somewhat reluctantly, Officer Pavel agreed to her demands, recognizing that any further discussion would be pointless. Though the decision weighed on his mind, he accepted that it was the only feasible option given the circumstances. As he disembarked, Catherine watched with a fleeting sense of satisfaction, unaware of the severe consequences her actions would soon unleash. About 20 minutes after takeoff, a member of the flight crew approached Catherine, breaking her brief moment of triumph with alarming news. A significant dispute had erupted on board. Concerned, she made her way to the economy section where the disturbance was unfolding, only to encounter the most shocking revelation. 2 passengers were embroiled in a heated argument that, she realized, had originated from her earlier interaction with Officer Pavel. The dispute had sparked a broader debate among several passengers regarding the ethical conduct of the flight crew, quickly escalating into an intense altercation. From her position, Catherine could see the young woman who had earlier stood up for Officer Pavel. This woman, unlike Pavel, who was a person of color, fervently argued against what she perceived to be discriminatory actions by the crew and pledged to escalate the issue to airport management. Meanwhile, a group of passengers supported Catherine's initial decision, asserting that she had acted within her rights. The atmosphere was fraught with tension, with voices raised in passionate exchanges. The cabin became noisy as passengers, disturbed by the ongoing conflict, began to voice their dissatisfaction. Faced with the gravity of the situation and its potential repercussions for her career, Catherine managed to quell the unrest among the agitated passengers, striving to restore peace and order within the tense confines of the aircraft. Earlier altercation with him had occurred under his professional scrutiny. The remainder of the flight had proceeded in peace and tranquility, but as the plane landed in Florida, Catherine was filled with regret. Her remorse stemmed not from guilt about having Officer Pavel removed from the plane, but from the public nature of their confrontation, which had unfolded before the eyes of many passengers. As the flight crew disembarked, each member weary and looking forward to some much-needed rest at home, Catherine was greeted with an unexpected situation. Unbeknownst to her, 2 airport officials were waiting to speak with her urgently about the incident that had transpired earlier. As she approached them, she steeled herself for a conversation that could potentially alter the course of her career. Catherine, a young stewardess with aspirations of a long tenure in the airline industry, found herself in a challenging predicament when she was summoned to appear before a disciplinary panel without delay. It had become apparent that news of her earlier misstep had reached the higher echelons of the airport authorities, a development she had dreaded. During the hearing, Catherine faced a barrage of questions regarding her conduct on the airplane prior to takeoff. She maintained her composure, confidently asserting that she had delivered exemplary service that morning. She also tried to downplay her role in the heated disputes that had erupted on board, suggesting that the clashes were primarily instigated by passengers with conflicting moral viewpoints. As Catherine skillfully navigated the questioning, she felt a growing sense of optimism that the tide of the proceedings was turning in her favor. However, just as the interview was nearing its conclusion, an official introduced a key witness in her case, catching her completely off guard. This unexpected development left Catherine reeling as she had not foreseen such a twist. The mysterious figure was not just any witness but a significant member of the airline security bench. As soon as this was disclosed, Catherine felt a chill run through her, her mind flooded with anxiety about the identity of this person. Moments later, her questions were answered in a startling way. A tablet was placed on the table in front of her, and as Catherine glanced at the screen, she recognized a familiar face, Officer Pavel. The realization hit her with immense impact, as she now understood the grave implications of the situation she was embroiled in. Officer Pavel was not only a police officer but also a high-ranking official within the airline security division. His final assignment involved evaluating the crew's performance and reporting back to the airline authorities in Florida. Unfortunately, Catherine's earlier altercation with him had unfolded under his professional watch, complicating her situation significantly. Officer Pavel had initially deemed the mission compromised, rendering his prior assessment useless. He considered rescheduling an assessment for a subsequent trip, but he soon recognized that the behavior exhibited by the flight crew during the incident already offered him critical insights. Catherine's eyes brimmed with tears, her body shaking with fear as the gravity of her situation became clear. When prompted to defend herself, the flustered flight attendant could initially only stutter incoherently, a stark testament to her agitated state. Eventually, she gathered her composure enough to relay a concise narrative, aiming to clear her name. Catherine admitted to harboring negative feelings towards Officer Pavel, but she clarified that these were not rooted in racism. As some might speculate, she recounted a distressing incident with another black officer who had mistakenly suspected her of wrongdoing and treated her harshly. This unfortunate encounter had left a profound impact on her, shaping her current perceptions and reactions. This previous unpleasant interaction caused Catherine to develop a strong aversion towards black police officers. Officer Pavel listened intently, trying to understand her perspective, although her explanation was plausible. He remained skeptical, viewing it as a likely attempt to salvage her career. He remembered how Catherine's disdainful looks were directed particularly at him and her blatant disregard for his dual role as a passenger and law enforcement officer, behavior that did not seem to stem from trauma but rather from deep-rooted prejudice. However, Officer Pavel empathized with Catherine's emotional and psychological distress stemming from her previous negative experience. While he believed her story to some extent, he could not disregard her discriminatory actions. He explained to Catherine that her role as a flight attendant required her to interact with people of diverse races and ethnicities. given this responsibility, it was imperative for her to overcome personal biases and maintain professionalism and respect for all passengers. Catherine listened carefully to Officer Pavel's counsel, and in those moments, she felt profound regret for her previous behavior towards him. A single negative past experience had clouded her judgment and actions. Through this disciplinary encounter, she recognized her errors and lack of foresight. Following the interview, Catherine was subjected to a demotion and suspension for a designated period. News of her misconduct quickly circulated throughout the airline, and by the month's end, her professional reputation had been significantly tarnished. A secretive committee was formed to closely observe the conduct of flight attendants and crew members, with a special focus on their interactions concerning gender and racial dynamics. Furthermore, the airline introduced several reforms in its employment and human relations policies to ensure that similar incidents would not occur in the future. The story of Catherine served as a pivotal lesson for many in the aviation industry. It highlighted the importance of maintaining professional integrity and the need for flight attendants to prioritize their duties over personal prejudices and biases. This case not only delivered a powerful message but also initiated widespread changes throughout the national airline industry. What an incredible tale! If you were in Officer Pavel's position, how would you have dealt with this situation? Do you think he handled it well? We would love to hear your views in the comments section below. Your insights are valuable to us. Now, prepare for another engaging story as we proceed to the next one. Gently, she responded, "Sir, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. This is my seat. Here's my boarding pass." She extended the pass towards him, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear but from the discomfort of confrontation. The man, however, was not appeased. His face grew redder as he squinted at the boarding pass. Then without apology, he gruffly said, "Well, move over then," indicating the empty window seat next to her. Gail, with some effort due to her arthritis, shifted to make room. Jasmine, who had been observing the exchange from her seat across the aisle, felt a rush of protectiveness towards her mother but remained calm, watching closely. Throughout the long flight from Kingston, Jamaica, to Barcelona, Gail, a proud member of the Windrush generation, and her daughter Jasmine had been immersed in reflections of their recent visit. The trip had been a poignant homecoming for Gail, who had left Jamaica as a young woman and had not returned until now. Decades later, it had been a joyful discovery for Jasmine. Connecting with the culture and heritage of her parents, they had explored local markets, relished the rich, spicy flavors of traditional Jamaican cuisine, and reconnected with distant relatives, some of whom were meeting Jasmine for the first time. This journey had not only been a physical travel across the globe but also a deep dive into their familial roots and a rekindling of Gail's childhood memories. Every corner of Kingston had stories to tell, each one vividly brought to life by Gail's anecdotes. The lush landscapes, the pulsating rhythms of reggae, and the warm, welcoming smiles of the locals had left an indelible mark on both. Now, as their plane descended towards Barcelona, where Gail had made her home in a cozy council apartment, the stark contrast between the warmth they had experienced in Jamaica and the cold reception from the man next to Gail was jarring. The anticipation of returning to familiar surroundings was tinged with the discomfort of this final leg of their journey. Despite the unpleasant encounter, Gail's spirit remained unbroken. She had faced challenges before, both in her youth when she first migrated to Europe and now, in her senior years, dealing with the physical limitations of arthritis. Yet, her resolve to maintain dignity and grace under pressure was as strong as ever. As the plane finally touched down in Barcelona, Gail and Jasmine prepared to disembark, eager to leave the confined space of the aircraft and the unpleasantness behind. They looked forward to the comfort of home, where the memories of their Jamaican adventure would be fondly recounted and cherished. A stark reminder of the resilience and strength that defined Gail's journey through life. "I'm sorry," she apologized, introducing herself with a gentle voice. "My name is Gail." "I don't care," he snapped, impatience edging his voice. "Hurry up, I can't believe how slow you are." As Gail tried to rise from her seat, her arthritic joints painfully locked, forcing her to sink back down with a grimace. "Are you doing this on purpose?" the man accused, his tone biting and aggressive. "Move it, get up, or do you need me to pull you out of your seat?" "I'm trying my best," Gail responded, her voice trembling as the man loomed over her, his presence intimidating. She feared he might actually resort to physical measures. "I suffer from arthritis," she explained, her words barely above a whisper. "That's not my problem," he retorted coldly. "It shouldn't be my problem either. You're holding everyone up." Sorry, Gail murmured, her apology barely audible over his loud complaints to the other passengers. "I'm just waiting for this elderly black lady to get out of her seat." His loud, abrasive tone attracted disapproving glances from nearby passengers. With a mix of embarrassment and resolve, Gail made a second effort to stand. She gripped the seat firmly, her lips pressed tightly together to suppress cries of pain. Using the back of the seat for support, she managed to shift to the side. Just enough to let the man, whom she overheard was named Eric, brush past her roughly without a word of thanks, trying to block out his presence. Gail watched as Eric theatrically checked the locks on his luggage before placing it in the overhead compartment and taking his seat. She hoped he would calm down now that he was seated, but his behavior only worsened. Eric began to spew a series of racist slurs, loudly expressing his displeasure at having to sit next to a black person for the duration of the flight. He ranted about her supposed poor command of English and complained that people like her were unfairly benefiting from affirmative action, taking jobs from others. His tirade was laced with baseless accusations and shockingly personal insults, labeling her a silly woman and an ugly old black grandma. Gail attempted to defend herself against his vitriol, but the confrontation left her feeling deeply shaken and distressed. "Be quiet," Eric commanded loudly, as if he were the only one entitled to speak, his tone sharp and demeaning. "Don't you dare talk back to me," he continued, asserting his dominance in the crowded cabin of the plane. "Stop speaking with that disrespectful accent. Speak proper English, if you can." As Eric's voice grew louder, the surrounding passengers began to notice, their gazes turning toward the escalating confrontation. Eric's tirade quickly devolved into a personal attack on Gail, calling her character into question in front of an audience. The severity of his words underscored his serious threat to have her removed from the flight. Although Gail doubted his actual authority to eject her, she gripped her boarding pass, a symbol of her rightful place aboard the aircraft, even tighter. At that moment of tension, support arrived in the form of Jasmine, Gail's daughter, who had caught wind of the altercation. Rushing to her mother's defense, Jasmine confronted Eric with resolute determination. "Why are you speaking to my mother like this? You have no right," she demanded. Her call for an apology seemed to only exacerbate Eric's fury, his cheeks puffing out as he retorted, accusing them of conspiring against him, a poor law-abiding citizen. Drained by the encounter, Gail felt emotionally depleted, yet Jasmine persisted in standing up to Eric. Sadly, his close-minded and prejudiced mindset left him unreceptive to any rational discussion. This confrontation was particularly disheartening for Gail, especially given the uplifting time she had just spent reconnecting with her family in the Caribbean, a sharp contrast to the pervasive racism she had encountered since her early days in Britain. Over the years, Gail and her husband Richard faced frequent racism, from overt hostility by neighbors and colleagues, to violent acts against black teenagers by gangs and even the police, who were meant to provide protection. Despite these challenges, Gail and Rich worked tirelessly to foster a nurturing environment that celebrated the rich tapestry of Jamaican and British cultures. They instilled in their children a deep sense of pride and self-worth, even in the face of societal biases that seemed relentlessly against anyone with a darker skin tone. Together, they weathered the complexities of a multicultural society. They took on extra jobs to cover university fees, their pride swelling at each graduation ceremony. Their children flourished, securing respectable positions in their chosen fields, a testament to their resilience and hard work. Now, with their children grown and independent, Rich and Gail were beginning to plan for a quieter life, reflecting on their journey and the obstacles they had overcome. Yet, incidents like the one with Eric on the plane served as a harsh reminder of the ongoing struggles against racial prejudice, connections they had rediscovered. It was a poignant reminder that the journey of life, though marked by profound losses, also offered moments of beautiful rediscovery and connection. After their children had established their own families, Gail and Rich entered a tranquil phase of their lives. embracing their roles as doting grandparents. However, this peaceful period was abruptly disrupted when a routine health checkup unveiled that Rich was afflicted with cancer. Despite his advanced age, Rich had maintained an energetic vibrancy, and now, in his 70s, he was confronted with his greatest challenge yet. Gail, unwaveringly supportive as ever, readied herself to face this new battle alongside him. Fighting determinedly for Rich's health and life, despite her devoted efforts, fueled by deep love, the outcome was heart-wrenching. The cancer was relentless, having spread extensively, and a few months later, Gail found herself clasping Rich's hands as he drew his final breath. The loss of Rich shattered Gail profoundly, more so than any other hardship she had ever encountered. For half a century, Rich had been her steadfast partner and anchor, and with his departure, she felt adrift. As if her life had lost its compass, witnessing their mother's spiraling grief and depression, her children sought ways to draw her out of her sorrow. Jasmine, residing nearest to Gail, suggested a trip to Jamaica to reconnect with their cultural roots and heritage. Initially, Gail was reluctant. The idea of traveling seemed pointless without Rich by her side. However, Jasmine had an ace up her sleeve. She had been in touch with a vicar in Kingston who had connected her to Brenda, a woman residing in a local senior home who astonishingly turned out to be Gail's long-lost relative. Intrigued by the prospect of having unknown kin in her ancestral hometown, Gail gradually warmed to the idea of the journey. Jasmine meticulously orchestrated the travel plans, securing flights with a budget airline and coordinating with the Jamaican military police for a visit to the Kingston Park Camp Cemetery, the final resting place of their newfound relative. During their stay, Brenda, who was actually the niece of Bill, introduced Gail and Jasmine to a family they had never known. They shared traditional meals featuring jerk chicken, bammy, and fried breadfruit, lovingly prepared by Brenda. Gail also reconnected with her cousins and their offspring. It was an enlightening and heartwarming experience to exchange life stories and reforge familial bonds after so many years. The trip culminated on an uplifting note, characterized by warm embraces, radiant smiles, and sincere promises to maintain contact, their luggage brimming with souvenirs and gifts for her children and grandchildren back home. Gail and Jasmine boarded their flight. As their plane ascended, they sat together, reflecting on the profound familial connections they had rekindled. It served as a poignant reminder that although life's journey may be punctuated by deep losses, it also offers beautiful moments of rediscovery and connection. During their flight home, Gail and her companions were immersed in a lively discussion, enthusiastically sharing thoughts and experiences from their recent journey. They reminisced about numerous memories, which led Gail to reflect on the societal progress towards inclusivity in their new community, progress she credited to diversity training and multicultural appreciation initiatives. However, the positive mood was abruptly disrupted by Eric, who repeatedly directed offensive insults at Jasmine, his remarks growing increasingly vile. Unbeknownst to Gail and Jasmine, assistance was closer than they thought. Seated directly behind Gail was Skylar, a young digital entrepreneur and influencer known for his stance against racism and hate speech. As Eric's verbal abuse intensified, Skylar discreetly recorded every word, preparing to intervene. He noticed Eric's body language becoming more aggressive, seemingly on the verge of physically assaulting Gail, an elegant elderly woman nearing her 80s with a delightful Jamaican accent, repulsed by what he was witnessing. Skylar was resolved to not let such disrespect go unchallenged. The moment Eric reached out and grabbed Gail's wrist, Skylar, who maintained his physical fitness through regular workouts, quickly seized Eric's wrist in return. Startled, Eric yelled, "Hey, let go," but Skylar firmly responded, "Not a chance, you will apologize to the lady, or else." This altercation drew applause from a few nearby passengers. Though Eric appeared subdued, Skylar maintained his hold, insisting on an apology. An air steward rushed over, drawn by the noise. Jasmine hastily tried to present the situation to the steward, falsely accusing Skylar and his group of initiating an assault. Gail, shocked and appalled, attempted to clarify the actual sequence of events, but the steward had already summoned security. In a disappointing twist, security overlooked Eric's instigating actions and instead removed Skylar from the plane, reseating Gail away from Eric and Jasmine. As the plane finally took off, Gail, deeply troubled by the injustice and disturbance to their previously peaceful journey, struggled to manage her emotions. The incident left a lasting impression, starkly contrasting the sense of inclusivity and hope she had earlier felt, highlighting a sobering reality of unresolved societal issues, negative impact on their business reputation. In a sobering turn of events, Gail was confronted with the stark realization that even decades later, the ability of a white perpetrator to skew public perception and align it against a victim was still very much intact. This distressing truth came to light during a troubling incident at an airport. As the situation unfolded, Skylar, who had witnessed the event, was momentarily detained by airport security. Fortunately, he was able to present a video recording on his phone that captured the confrontation between Gail and Eric. This crucial piece of evidence led to his swift release by the authorities, who apologized for the inconvenience by offering him a meal voucher and an upgrade to first class for his next flight. Undeterred by the ordeal, Skylar took the opportunity to upload the footage to his social media channels. By the time he and Jasmine touched down in London, the video had already garnered 30,000 views. Its popularity surged, and within a few days, it had been viewed over 500,000 times, drawing attention from viewers as far away as Skylar's cousin Brenda in Jamaica. The widespread sharing of the clip brought a torrent of negative publicity and criticism towards the airline, which struggled with ineffective damage control efforts that only further tarnished their public image. Eric, who had hoped to quietly resume his life in northeast London, found himself at the center of a storm he could not escape. Despite only sustaining minor injuries from a scuffle with Skylar during the flight from Barcelona, the repercussions of his actions were severe. The video, now viral, exposed his behavior to his local community, including his neighbors and colleagues. Eric was employed as a retail manager at a store that supplied building materials, a role he once thought was merely focused on the straightforward principles of supply and demand. However, the video's circulation brought his racist outburst to light, shocking contractors and workers who frequented his store. The backlash was swift and severe, with one union worker voicing that it was untenable for them to continue transactions with a company that employed someone who harbored such bigoted views. This sentiment spread quickly, fueling discussions of a potential strike unless the company cut ties with Eric. The controversy escalated further when protesters gathered outside Eric's workplace, with some even resorting to vandalizing his car. Eric found himself forced to sneak into work in disguise. Though this tactic was not always successful, as the pressure continued to build, it became increasingly clear that his employer faced a tough decision: to sever ties with Eric in an effort to mitigate the damage to their business reputation and uphold their commitment to inclusivity and respect within the community. Eric was initially reassigned to an office on the outskirts of London, leading to a much longer commute that proved to be quite inconvenient. Unfortunately, this relocation did not address the underlying problems. Eventually, the situation escalated when two of Eric's colleagues decided to go public with their grievances. This action compelled the company to dismiss Eric in an effort to safeguard their public image. The loss of his high-level executive's salary was just the beginning of Eric's woes. He soon found himself entangled in a legal dispute after being accused of verbally assaulting two individuals, Gail and Jasmine. The ensuing lawsuit, exacerbated by Eric's inadequate handling of the situation, severely damaged his reputation. During the legal proceedings, Eric's defense crumbled and a video captured by Skylar was introduced as damning evidence. Ultimately, Eric was found guilty and faced a hefty fine, which severely impacted his financial stability. In an effort to make amends, Gail and Jasmine were awarded complimentary airline tickets as compensation for the distress they suffered during the flight where Eric had been openly aggressive towards them. This gesture also aimed to remedy the poor handling of the situation by the airline's PR team. Now, they were able to travel back to their cherished home in Jamaica without any financial worry, ironically thanks to the same man who had caused them distress. As for Skylar, who played a pivotal role by recording the crucial evidence, the text is unclear about whether he received proper compensation after being removed from the plane. If you have ever faced similar challenges with unfair customer service, please share your experiences in the comments below. We would love to hear your stories. That concludes our update for now. We look forward to seeing you in our next video.